For me, it's time that matters. Everything is impermanent, never lasting, changing the moment. In the photo reportage, which serves as our diary, only the instant counts. You must combine the emotion of a subject and the pleasure of composition, sense the golden section, control the balance of shapes. For me, those are the basics, plus what comes from the subconscious. The contact sheet is like the analyst's couch. It's also a kind of seismograph, recording the instant. It's all there, what surprises us, what we catch, what we miss, what disappears. Or else, an event that fulfills itself as an image. Alberto was an old friend of mine. I often shot him in his studio, in the street, whenever we'd meet. We never got in each other's way. Don't go after something. Let it come to you. Be open, receptive. That's why you mustn't think. Cézanne said, when I paint and start to think, it all goes to hell. I delight in the immediate response to a subject, a vanishing subject. I'm not a professional portraitist. It just happens. I shoot my friends. The only thing I enjoy now. That struggle with myself, with time, with a person's smile. That's the hardest for me. And then, shaping it within a background, a mood. People say, shall I? No, catch the animal in its den. The surroundings are as important as the face. A contact sheet is nothing like a writer's rough draft. It's full of odds and ends, discoveries at times. It's the photographer or collaborator who must edit. You make selections, the ordinary stuff for the press, and the cream for the books and exhibits. A contact sheet can be unnecessary. The Currys had a sign on their door, "Enter without ringing." I opened the door, and this is what I saw. I shot before greeting them. Looking and seeing is not identifying, it's getting inside. There are faces that radiate, like beams that bathe the entire film. Bernal used to say, "What are you after? Why this instant? Why press the shutter just then?" I just answered, "Why did you just put this dab of yellow?" He laughed. We knew sensibility cannot be explained. Doing photo reportages, camera always in hand, is a lifetime's work. It's hard to do that and draw as well. But in this field, the work of others still moves me. I never look for the historic shot. It comes to me. You have to be there and grab it. Be there. Don't think. Forget yourself. Don't search. It also takes a good nose and a sharp eye. There are no secrets. That's all there is to it. Photography's just a minor craft. What's all this about art? We're craftsmen, like a joiner making a lovely chair. I'm not into photography per se. I enjoy being there, recording. There, yes, yes, no, yes. Finger on the shutter, hesitating, not shooting, but always there. We steal, but in order to give. I once took photos of Mauriac. He said to me, "What should I do?" "Nothing, nothing, just be natural." So he said, "You're really complicated." Houseman was entirely different. He'd say to me, "On your feet, jump, jump again." I got 1 or 2 shots of him sitting. I never managed to photograph politicians or actors, because they know their business too well. Actors ask, "How do you want me? Tragic, comic, sentimental?" In conclusion, succeed. What does it mean? Succeed in living? Succeed in dying? Succeed.
A sheet of contacts, 36 exposures, 6 strips of 6 photographs taken one after the other. You read them from left to right like a text. It's the diary of a photographer. You see what he sees through the viewfinder, his hesitations, his hits, his misses, his choice. He chooses one moment, one angle, another moment, another angle. He insists, he stops. You rarely see the contacts of a photographer. You only see the picture chosen. You don't see the before or the after, like you do on a proof sheet. A picture is taken at 125th of a second. What do you know of a photographer's work? 100 pictures? Let's say 125. Well, it's a body of work. That comes to, all told, 1 second. Let's say more like 250 photographs. That would be a rather large body of work, and that would come out to 2 seconds. The life of a photographer, even of a great photographer, as they say, 2 seconds. Okay, contacts. You see the before and the after, why one picture is taken rather than the other, and then why one is chosen rather than another. Here, a cast of characters in cement, the garden of a sculptor in the south of France in 1970. Less surprises than with people in movement, but the same problem: how to frame, what to photograph. The text says, "Give us a smile, honey." Right away, baby. That's it. Terrific. Don't move. No chance he'll move. He weighs a ton and he's screwed into the ground. Anyway, that's what photography is about. More or less. A church in Harlem, New York, 1954. One of my first photographs. 4 characters framed in a doorway in a classic group arrangement, waiting for a photographer. A little further on, 2 kids want their picture taken. The deacon watches. He goes away. Another picture. Better. A family album pose, the sharp perspective lines of the kids from a few minutes ago in the door behind, and especially the handkerchief in the deacon's back. An accident makes the picture. A few steps away, almost a photograph. A wall in New York 20 years ago. Cairo. Probably the name of a gang. Torn tar paper. A ready-made photo, a kind of art brut. All you have to do is frame and click. You can do 100 on that wall, no sweat. It's there for the taking. There are pictures like that all over. You just have to look. This picture is maybe better than that one, or this one, or that one. Another group, Little Italy. The dwarf is the street mascot in the Italian neighborhood in New York, 1954. Being photographed in the street was still a big deal back then. Anyhow, it was a surprise and a very big joke. You gotta be kidding. Hey, you got film in that camera? I use a wide-angle lens. The guys on the side don't know they're in the picture. They break up and they reveal themselves. It becomes a self-portrait. For a few minutes, the camera turns them on. I don't believe this. Hey, put his hat on. Lift him up. Hold him. But there's a limit. Both for me and for them. The surprise, the joke, wear thin. Hey, what's this for anyhow? Enough already. This guy's out of it. It's mine. Tokyo, 1961. A troupe of modern dancers that I bring into the traffic of Ginza. They come towards me, twisting convulsively. My Leica becomes a movie camera, shot after shot as fast as I can. No motor then, in fact I never use one. I like the excitement of reloading, aiming, and firing. I walk backwards, they advance, spastic and impenetrable, like Japanese should be. Cars barely miss us, we provoke each other. The funeral of the communist leader, Jacques Duclos, 1974, Paris. An enormous glum crowd, photos of Duclos pinned to the lapels, above their heads, l'humanité, humanity. For the French, it's the name of the communist newspaper. For others, the designation of a species. For me, it's both. I want a photo with the banner Humanité floating over woebegone, abandoned Parisian humans. Perhaps it's this one. New York, 1955. I was trying to put together my family album. I wanted to record everything. That day, a series on typography without people. Walls, signs, graffiti. Here the window of a bar, the Happy Days bar. A guy comes to have a look. I motion, don't move. He doesn't. A photo. The one I used in my book. There he was, posing for eternity in this typographic universe. That's the way it was, a New York bar in 1955. Then he starts to ham it up. Too much. Not as good. Down south, near Atlanta in 1963. An accident. An old woman, groggy but uninjured, stays in the car. You see her in the back. Now you don't. The cop hides her. I try to find her. There she is again. The beat-up car, the twisted door, the cop's fat ass, his gun, his handcuffs, his keys. He makes his report, I make mine. Further on, another report. The woman who drove the car, the truck driver, the sheriff. We're on Bob Dylan's Highway 61. I feel like I'm in an American movie. Moscow, 1959. The big department store GUM, we're in the photo department. Russians, high cheekbones, caps, checkered shirts. They move, so do I. It's like being in a Russian movie. The chandeliers, the heavy furniture, the sun behind that burns the film. On the right, someone watches me, suspicious. I walk away. A few steps, and we're in Chekhov. I photograph a woman with a flowered sweater. Not a photograph, more of a reflex, a detail. A second later, she's still there, but everything has changed. Everything has come together. The light, the staircase, the actors, and in the bargain, a pretty girl looking at the camera. This is a photograph. Paris, Armistice Day, 1968. The crowded sidewalk, trying to take a picture. Hitting and missing, then I stop. Standing in the street, a rare moment. It's all there. Foreground, middle ground, background. Couple one, couple two. The bar, Le Petit Magot in the back. People at the windows, I see it all at once. And as usual, someone watching me. Then another picture. The man's gone. It's over. Only one photo, that's it. Not so bad, though. One's enough. 1961 in Tokyo. In the subway at 7 a.m. It's dark. I use long exposures, about an eighth of a second. Blurred images, I play with accident. Here something happens. I discover what on the contact sheet. For me, it's a photo. For others, not. At a costume ball in Paris a few years ago, using a flash with long exposures, something I've always done, the surrounding light burns out the edges. A monster comes out of the fog of flare, stares at me. A woman goes by, the flash freezes her. I guess at the result as the flash goes off. I'll find it on the contacts, maybe. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Here I do. A county fair in France, 1982, a sack race. Behind the barriers, half the town's population. I go from one group to the other. They think I'm from the local newspaper. Nobody pays attention. Everybody's here, wine growers, the baker's wife, the butcher, the village idiot, the deputy mayor. I could do a mile like that, framing group after group. A soccer game in Saint-Étienne in 1970. I walk along the stands. Practically no women. This is much too momentous. The local team is in trouble. Behind the wire fence, the fans suffer. Soccer can be tragic, especially the fans. New York, 1954, my old neighborhood, 108th Street and Amsterdam Avenue, the candy store. Candy and cream soda and newspapers and a phone booth and pitching pennies and matching nickels. Hangout number one for us kids. 20 years later, a kid squats down, poses for me. Two others take his place and his pose. Everything is just right, the ads, the slogans, the Hawaiian shirt. It's a photograph. I put the negative in the enlarger and play with the focusing. The whites bleed, the blacks spill over. It becomes another picture. Why not? Early in the 80s, July in Coney Island, near the subway exit. People pour out with their picnics, their bathing suits, mattresses, the icebox. A hectic street corner, the photo a rectangle of disorder. In the back, the only white woman with her kid in the sun. I frame the crowd around them. The crowd moves, one shot. They disappear. I wait for them to show up again. They don't. But I know they're there. A concert of the Rolling Stones in Paris in 1982. I'm right up close, but nobody seems to see me. I get closer. Looks, faces in every direction. I frame as if I were in a studio. Here I've almost got a photograph. Then a face appears on the left. There, that becomes a photograph. And there you are, about 20 photographs, 100 non-photographs, a few contact sheets, a few seconds.
I like to watch, to close my eyes in the act of voyeurism. The photographer is a voyeur. I am a voyeur. He who watches becomes a voyeur, who looks at what he doesn't want to see. I like to watch. I'm afraid to watch. 10 years later, it's still there. The photographer's wanderings along the asylum corridors, searching, forward, backward, never satisfied. Victim or aggressor, it's toward himself, perhaps, that the violence is greatest. Look at the photographer, see the demystification of the hero, who above all takes from others. Luck plus labor equals, there is nothing. There are only photographs. To clear his conscience, the photographer calls himself an artist, a human being. His approach is similar to that of other madmen, with his own quest for the Holy Grail, the decisive instant, his quest for the angle. He's not normal. Anguished clown. The psychiatrist urges the photographer to watch. He will be the witness, a police report, of things we refuse to believe. We must denounce those who are unfortunate, everyone except the psychiatrist, and then again, he also likes to wander along the corridors of the 19th century. One does not come out untouched. One comes out liberated, having seen the outcome, yet knowing that tomorrow on the street the difference isn't very great. Fortunately, there are madmen at large. There are good photographers. There are botched pictures one doesn't show. Informer. The contact sheet becomes an informer. What makes a good photograph? A photograph one can look at without shame, without uneasiness. Here it's quite the contrary. No promise, no chance. Everything's dark, everything's true. The photographer is ready to do anything to obtain his photograph. Or does he suffer as much as his subjects, from whom he seeks to find a self-portrait? On pain, I liked watching, he says later. I stopped the day I sensed how to take good photographs. I never went back. Today I'm no longer afraid. I've left for other institutions, other asylums, closer still to my home, far from the Italian asylums, walls, pain of imprisoned man, pain of deformed man. Today the noise, it's the noise which haunts the memory, the impression of walking in circles, no exit. There's no longer any door. The photographer is here, looking like a new arrival, a new resident, present every day. He's neither doctor nor nurse. He's not of the profession. He wanders also, searching for something. He seems pleasant, not yet at ease. He doesn't talk. He appears not to look. He has something in his hand. The other attacked him, wanted to hit him. He ran away. Just in time, for the door was closed. There was no nurse. Perhaps he's a voyeur, a professional voyeur, spying on misfortune. Every day pain, that without and that within. There's also the light, this November light, which penetrates the rooms. He protects himself from the light, rather aggressive. It reminds me of playing truant. There is no sadness. The mind is in command. The mind is here. His PC. Everything is free without constraint. Thought alone remains free. It's the only thing still unconfined. The photographer also remains free. For the moment there are no photographs. The cinema waits to be born. I reject it for the moment I reject the film. These photographs help me to think. Later I will resume the photographer's wandering. First I must seek out the darkness, seek out the reason for making such images. Why? There is no answer. Man does not want to look at man's pain unless it's his own. He no longer wants to see anything. He no longer sees men. To avoid looking at their pain, to have less fear, to not understand, try to respect, betray. The two perhaps. There is the joy of this beautiful day, of asking for 100 lira, of smiling, of feeling happy, delivered, of talking to them. You have an accent. Where are you from? I know you. I saw you yesterday in the garden. You seem to be nice. I saw you taking photographs. I don't like photographers. Go to the devil with your camera. You must leave. No attack, no answer. I was already accustomed, as a reporter, to say nothing, to submit to everything. Which one was the victim? Each day, I emerge refreshed, rejuvenated, encouraged. The dream doesn't exist. I'm still here. Don't show fear. Don't provoke it. To show strength, so as to hide nothing. So many stories are going to die. So much pain imprisoned. So many childhood events forever lost. So many gazes dead. My own is in the process of changing. It no longer dares to stare. It no longer dares to stop. It's far away in childhood. Today a family arrived, 3 women in black. I don't dare to photograph. On the contrary, they pose. God, the oldest says to me. The man goes into the communal room. She stays close to the door. I watch from a distance. It's still daytime, but it's already dark. As for a child, and if the eyes were forever affected, is that violence? I wouldn't recover from that. I'd prefer to disappear, to have seen nothing, or rather to return, to be able to sleep, to wake up in the morning, go into the garden, and wait for the sun to break through. To drink a coffee, listen to music, to wait. I disappointed no one. No one expects anything from me. No one knows that I'm here. She stayed in Paris. I hide inside myself without her. I'll come back to take other photographs. Today I'm only passing by, not cheerful enough this afternoon to go walking with my friends. I take refuge with the women. My anger calms down. There's no noise. It's another pain, more secret. Asylum or refuge. Everything's mixed up. She laughs. She's making fun of me. Everyone laughs. Now there are cries. No one pays any attention. The children have left. The television doesn't work. They approach me, they're less fearful. They follow me closely. They speak loudly. They're going to touch me. Now one withdraws. I walk without watching. I take no photographs. I'm less afraid. I'm still afraid. Some music saves me. The doors are closed. Someone's imprisoned. A sister arrives. They talk to me now. I don't understand anything. It's Venetian. They limp. Everyone's walking badly. I walk badly also. To approach them, to frighten them less, to say hello. Forget me. I want you to forget me. I remain fixed. I'm no longer the attraction. I'll return tomorrow. I watch from the window. I take a photograph to say that I am. They don't understand. No one comes to see them. There is no more family. There are medicines. I'm going to leave, return. No one talks to me. I start feeling happy, happy like a child. The adults are far away. Perhaps that's joy. Why not? But the photographer sees nothing. He passes, returns. The madman is tranquille. He is king. He sleeps. He eats. Isolated from life, he recaptures life. The photographer passes by, developed images. He will be perplexed for a long time. He must choose. That's it, the photograph. No one must know. Everyone sees what he wants. Say nothing. The asylum belongs to everyone. To me, to you. What's left? Images of the photographer's anguish. Not even that. See again his deviance. Perhaps today there will be the joy of seeing pain again, of being freed. Not too much. Otherwise there'll be no more images. No more life. Now all is faded. All is confused. No more details. Kodak or Ilford. Mind images, subjective images, objective images, intervening, participating, work quickly. I press to justify my presence. I'm slow. There's nothing here. Everything is spectacular. Everything is daily life. Everything is put on stage. There's nothing to see. No scoop, no princess. I'm disconcerted. I no longer know what to photograph. The bed is empty. I think of Paris. There's no itinerary for taking a good photograph. Listen. The image is mute. It doesn't want to hear. It's not sentimental. It rejects sound. No pity. No breath from the film. Nothing. There remains the film grain. Everything is black and white. There's no traveling color. We're far from Paris. We're tranquil. There are no airplanes, no exotism, no hotel. Heat is absent. I must return in summer. I like the winter. The minister is here. He examines each image. I'm next to him, ill at ease. I follow him. It's the inauguration, the first time. There's a single entrance, a single exit. Aestheticism and psychiatry. I can't write about it. It's mundane, it's life. No one's looking. I'm free. The hours pass. The neon lights are illuminated, even during the day. I belong to the family. Yesterday, a dangerous woman followed me. Today, I'll stay here. They aren't paying any attention to me. There is sex, cold. No one wants to pay attention. It's all part of asylum conduct. The despair of cohabitation, of deviance of what is normal for men. Memory will keep the rendezvous. Pursue you, pursue us. Everything is leprous, humid. They watch me, they also. Perhaps they've never seen this kind of madman, a new resident with this disease, attracted and haunted by shame. The men in white are rare. In the morning, a few. By afternoon, no one. Only the photographer who missed his vaporetto because the city is still there. To watch. Take a photograph for me, just one, please. I no longer have a family. I'll return in summer. I'll return in winter. The television is playing without sound. Pain to be framed. Pain, that is the frame. Light, that's joy.
I try to be a photographer. I don't know how to talk. I'm not interested in talking. If I have something to say, perhaps it can be found in my photos. I'm not interested in explaining things, in saying why and how. I'm willing to show my photos, not so much my contact prints. I often work on small prints. I look at them frequently and for a long time, put them up on the wall and compare them to make sure of my choice. I leave it to others to say what they mean. You know my photos. You've published them. You've exhibited them. So you can say whether they have a meaning or not.
It's true. I've known Koudelka for a long time, for 20 years, since he left Czechoslovakia. It was the end of the Prague Spring, the end of a dream. There was no dialogue possible between the Russian soldiers and the population of a city under martial law. Violence was growing constantly. Josef Koudelka lived intensely through these mad summer days, this national tragedy. He says it was the high point of his life. He is not a witness of history. The story he tells in feverish pictures, that story is his own. Two years later, he came to Paris. He joined Magnum and has never stopped moving since. From Ireland to Sicily, from Greece to Spain. He still lives on next to nothing, still continues to work. He says, I want to see everything, to look at everything. I want to be the view itself. Henri Breton once said that the eye exists in a primitive state. If you apply that to photography, and you're looking for a name to illustrate it, Koudelka's seems the most appropriate. His silent, frenzied accumulation of images and his paradoxical organization of time are primitive. Photography taken as a seasonal activity, with fine weather for the harvest, storage that lasts through the winter, contact sheets in an attic, and small prints by the thousands. Prints he goes over time and time again, automates and combines. All those pictures he refuses to acknowledge. And then the others. the ones that are his for life, the ones he acknowledges and accepts. His contempt for commentary and explanation, justification, is primitive too. His rejection even of captions and of any information. Only a fierce drive to do what he must. Seeing, a frenzy of seeing, more and more, and of keeping what he sees, setting it in a form that is his, according to themes which become more distinct and clear as time goes by. As I wander through these contact sheets marked in 3 colors, white, blue, and red, leafing through the piles of prints he leaves on my table each year, I feel I'm following in his footsteps, putting my eye to his viewfinder. I travel by proxy, seeing what he has seen, suddenly gripped by a truth that belongs only to him, punctuated by red lines.
Liberty seized by the throat. It's a title. In reality, that's not quite it. Yes, perhaps it's liberty. Perhaps that's what Miss de Mayol called it. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's the official title. Our Venus. Venus is much prettier. God created women's breasts in such a way that women could be picked up there and set upright. Here the first pictures are shy. It's a rather long-distance treatment. And as I realized that these people were not disagreeable, that on the contrary it seemed to amuse them to see that a photographer was recording this scene, I approached progressively. That there's a fellow who's got hold of her by the hip. And then afterward, of course, Mayol's model was there, giving advice on how to orient the statue. Here's the woman in good spirits. Well, of course, it's an easy effect, placing the woman between the statue's legs, her own legs, when she was young. And here they are. They continue. She moves away, a bit more in silhouette. She judges the lighting, and she appears in the foreground wearing a leopard coat. And then, little by little, an audacity takes hold of me, and I approach even closer. This picture here wasn't bad, of the hand, with the fellow's suspenders running down his back, tightly gripping the woman. A short rest. And then that's it. They judged the statue's vertical aspect. That fellow there gives his opinion. And finally we arrive at this first photograph, the one which seems to me the most representative. There's motion, composition in the form of the letter A. Quite good, that. Well, I was finally satisfied. This one, this photograph here of the accordionist, I call it, well, in the context, I name it, in short, the music lover killers. I chose this one, you see, because apart from the waiter who's doing the washing up, all of the faces converge towards the young woman. And so these fellows arrived, covered with blood, and then the girl played a song. I still remember the song. It was called, "You Can't Imagine How Much I Love You. It's So Nice to Be Embraced." And then these fellows who had just been butchering animals were completely taken by the melody, while she had a distant air about her, contemptuous, kind of a queen. I don't know if I began with a close-up, or if I took the overall scene with the singer who was called Lulu, a singer who sang down-to-earth Jean-Berthe Silva. And then you see, there she is again, Madame Lulu, with those fellows watching her. It's not bad, but there's too much confusion. It's yet another confused photograph, reaching for simplicity. Well then, here's a fellow taken from the back. I like the handsome shape of his apron. We back up. And here this one's almost successful, except that someone's not at all interested in the music. To arrive finally at this one again, here the faces slowly turn, slowly, and then, that's it. There's a single moment, a fraction of a second, where everything comes together. This photograph of a young woman was taken at the Boule Rouge, Lap Street. I call it Anita. That's all I know about her. I never saw her again. Suddenly, just like that, she herself proposed to take off the little jacket she was wearing, and she appeared with bare shoulders. Also, the position of her arms was very, very symmetric, like that. It's very pretty, except for the hand. I would have liked the hand outstretched, but then perfection's not of this world, thank God, and the hand remains a hand. And before taking off her jacket, she was much more anonymous. Here she is, then, with her black garment, and the arms are missing. Yes, it's obvious there's an element missing here. First, of course, before I approached her, I took a more general view of all the young girls waiting for their escorts, with the reflection of their legs on the floor, which seemed quite pretty. All of those legs reflecting, very pretty. I did well to wait, and to have the audacity to ask her, "Do you mind if?" "Yes." And then she herself took off her little jacket, and with that, the chrysalis opened, and the butterfly appeared. This picture was taken, indeed this series of pictures was taken, following a coach tour. I had signed up for a tour of Paris by night. Everyone got out of the coach, all squeezed together, and entered a place called the Petit Balcon, a doubtful pun. A scene representing a Java vache dance. In other words, there are a pair of dancers, and at a certain moment the man throws his companion to the floor. She then seeks refuge among the spectators' feet. It was at this moment then that the photograph was taken. First I made several unfortunate attempts, then several not quite successful ones. Here she is sitting on some people's laps, but it's still very confusing. Here, an outright close-up, but it's becoming a bit vulgar, doesn't succeed. Here we achieve the necessary reserve between the actress and the spectator, who in fact is participating in the show, given the gentleman's slightly amused air and the lady's rather irritated expression. She's just a little undressed, which contrasts well with the perfect tourist in his rather strict suit. She's resigned. Imagine being thrown to the floor 15 times in one evening. Not much fun. No, she's a little tired, bruised, scarred. Something tragic about all of this. This photograph, I call it Papa. Papa. It was the gondola festival at Choisy-le-Roi. I think it was some kind of chariot contest, decorated chariots. And so, there was this man with an old toy car, which he had made into an airplane for his son. And you know, this must be one of the oldest photographs I've taken. Must be 1930, 31. And at that time, we were very economical with film. First of all, it was a Rolleiflex with 6 poses, so you triggered only when you felt really good. First, I took a shot of the couple, father and son, passing in front of some buildings. But it's very confusing because the public merges in from the background. It doesn't have that feeling of solitude that I finally recovered later. Here they're still lost in the crowd, and it's still confusing. There we begin to separate them. There the two with respect to the setting. But the setting doesn't have much interest here, it's banal. Whereas here, the Mimile Pavilion, in the background, lots of space. The couple's solitude. They're completely unaware of the mockery one could make of them. In any case, I was much more mischievous at that time than I am now. It seemed to me that I was more cruel. Still had a touch of childhood cruelty to take a picture like that. So full of mockery. Which finally wears away somewhat with time, leaving only this tender and rather touching scene. And this starts at Hébert Square, a day which doesn't seem to be going well at all. We begin taking pictures nervously, because we've come, so we say to ourselves, I must accomplish something. So we start taking street pictures which don't hold together, which are poorly constructed, poor scenery. Then later, the kid. We say now that's starting to look interesting because he's carrying a cardboard rifle on his back. He looks about, here, there, as if he was going to go underwater hunting with well, yes. And then later on, the boy and the girl holding a small child by the hand. And then I got fed up, a bit discouraged. I turned my back on the little square there. They walked into it. They came and placed themselves inside the viewfinder, but exactly as I would have wished them to be placed. I think they're hardly even aware of me. They don't see me. The boy's totally indifferent. Little girl, and that's a fortunate picture, It's like that. It arranges itself like a bouquet, We place the flowers like so, and then the bouquet takes care of arranging itself. And there's the V. Always the letter V. The V. The lines of the police alarm, the background, and the kids who come and place themselves at the center of this sort of angle. There's no merit in that. Just being there. To me, the postern of the poplars, that's a pretty name. The postern of the poplars. So I liked the setting. I'd already begun photographing that dead tree which was completely stripped, and then some kids came to play. Well, they started to play there in the distance, like that. Then they began jumping over the mounds. I waited through 5 pictures. I had to take 6 to get that kid jumping like that, the posture. And it wasn't easy to take, because films weren't very sensitive, and that, judging from the sharpness, was at 1/100th of a second, which was already quite good. And here, everything's rather well arranged, with the tree in the center, this ridiculous house on the left, and the silhouette flashing in the sky. I don't know if I noticed that when I took the photograph. Once again, it's good fortune. But once again, I waited. When people talk to me about picture hunters, I very quietly laugh, because I'm not a hunter of pictures, I'm a fisher of pictures. And in the case of the painting in the shop window, it's not rod and reel fishing where one's running after trout. No, it's cane pole fishing. It was in '47, I believe. She was making a bit of a scandal, this woman in black stockings showing her derriere. And from the shop window, one saw people filing by who were rather often scandalized. And then this couple came in, the lady very interested in the profile of a vase in front of her, and she was examining the vase with interest, while the gentleman was taking a very sidelong glance at, how should we say, the convex side of the woman. And so in the end it was the sidelong glance. That's what interested me. But it's a question of luck. You wait, of course, but you have to be lucky enough to stumble onto this expression, because all the other photographs are really very nice, but this one is more powerful. This final photo. There weren't many like this one. There was only one. The Craftsman's Courtyard. Well, I call this one the Craftsman's Courtyard. It's in the 19th quarter of Paris. And it's a picture that seems to me very curious, very, very bizarre. If I had had the models at my disposal, I would never have arranged them like that. I would have approached much closer to the woman in order to get a bust shot of her. I would have my 4 characters in the background, on the left, but this proportion here is a revelation to me. A photographic chance. And it's not bad in the end. It's going off in all directions, this photo. The chap on the left is completely out of the action. The fellow hiding in the corner. It's really very, very strange, this story. I don't understand. How I could learn something from this photo. And indeed, it's put together poorly. There's the foreground. One always avoids placing a diagonal line like that at the bottom, and yet it works anyway. Afterwards, she runs away. It's no longer any good at all. Whereas here, at the time I must have liked it more. The cluster of humans there. And it's less successful. It's much more predictable, more common. Old hat, what? Whereas that one, no. Sometimes photography is bizarre. Just bizarre. I used to try to take photos which were completely closed, which contained within themselves a complete little story, concentrated, condensed. Now, it's enough to plant a little seed in people's heads, and that's enough.
A friend once said, "In Paris, you have memories everywhere." And it's true, for years now I've known all of Paris, all its streets. Yet every day I rediscover it. When I got my first Leica in 1950 or 1951, I was impressed by these newspaper billboards. Without wishing to enter into a history lesson, there was no TV then, there wasn't much in the way of radio, and as soon as the headlines went up, everybody would appear. I stood on a well-known street corner, Croix Rouge and Rue de Rennes, where everybody would come to read the headlines. And if you didn't remember the date, it'd be easy to find it, because that day the headline read, "MacArthur dismissed." It was during the Korean War, so we can situate it in the 50s, around 52 or 53. So, in this neighborhood of Saint-Sulpice, which isn't far from where I live, I stayed for not even an hour, and everybody came along. We can see a lady carrying milk cans. We see a man wearing one of those berets you don't see anymore, like my father used to wear, a priest going by. A woman dressed in black. We see this man wearing a hat. We can see... we feel the streets are rather empty, and everyone would come to see these newspaper headlines. But what's amusing is to see how clothes have changed. On this sheet, you have the essence of Paris, because it had been snowing, and snow is always wonderful. Since for black and white photos, especially, it gives everything a sharp outline. I went downstairs through the Luxembourg Gardens, and you see this succession of people. I should add, it was the first time it had snowed that winter. First snow is always magic, because it doesn't snow as much these days, so there you are. Then the children came. They'd come with their school because you can see another priest who's wearing his cassock, and we can see a confusion of people. Here I had to climb on a chair. This one didn't come out right. And then a miracle. Out of all these photos I took, there's one extraordinary one. I say it's extraordinary because someone once said to me that you don't take photos like that every day, where everything's in place. That's what's so amazing. It all looks right. I was passing through Maubert, and you can tell the weather was rather changeable. I saw these two little girls looking at a horse through a shop window. And I liked these two little girls. Then I'm sure I must have spoken to them. And I followed them, and then they stopped. And that's when I took the picture. What's amusing is if you look at the two girls' feet, they're slightly different. And back then, they wore aprons. As for the background, it must be said that back then the films we had weren't very sensitive, nor were some of the lenses, so the subject, the two little girls, is very sharp, but the background is a bit out of focus. And elsewhere on the contact sheet there's a young girl. I don't remember very well, but I do remember I met her near the Galerie Lafayette department store. Then these two little girls disappeared. These two little girls disappeared like two birds flying off. A photographer is like a bird too. I appeared in front of them for a moment. In moments like that, you don't think of giving your address or sending copies of the photos. So I lost track of these two little girls, especially as it was way back in 1953 or 54. The years went by, and then by a miracle, or maybe it wasn't, a few years later, not long ago, I was passing through Maubert again, and a well-dressed woman wearing a necklace, kind of preppy looking, stops me and says, "You're Boubat." And I say, "Yes." "You took a photo of a little girl outside my antique shop." I say, "Yes," and I'm reminded of these two little girls. I say, "Yes, but there were two little girls." "Yes," she says. "One of the little girls was the daughter of the previous owner of the shop. And this girl became Miss France. And then she became a tramp." You see how things go. But I couldn't tell you which of the girls it was because I never saw them again. A writer, Michel Tournier, said to me, "You have a lot of photos of people taken from behind. Maybe we can do a book together." So we put them all together. Well, I was in this little car. A girlfriend was driving. As I wasn't driving, I could look out the window. And I saw this statue, which amused me, this naked couple. Come to think of it, if you look closely, statues are quite funny, but people don't look at them anymore. We see a man who's more or less naked beside a woman who's half-dressed. So I told her to stop the car, and I went to photograph the statue, because it was there in front of me. So I thought, why not seize the moment? And just then, this young couple came along. I swear I didn't set it up. It's an adventure. In fact, every photo is an adventure. And on the same contact sheet, which has gotten a bit damaged over the years, when I did an exhibition at the Cabaret Museum, I'm not even the one who saw it first, I had this photo printed up because it hadn't ever been printed before. It's a photo taken at the Louvre Museum. It was raining and my attention must have been caught by the drops of rain. It looks like Venice. You'd think it was the Grand Canal with the bridge. I might add, I've never believed in the objectivity of photography. What's more, you can make a photo say whatever you want, even without touching it up. You just have to change the caption. I was walking through the Parc de Sceaux, and I saw a little field with Japanese flowering cherry trees. It was such a wonderfully beautiful sight that people were going over to look at them. One should never forget that everyone is sensitive to beauty. A few days later, it was so nice out that I decided to go back. I can't remember now, but I think I must have taken 2 or 3 photos the first time. When I went back, it had been raining, so there were petals on the ground, and it looked like snow. So we're back to this idea of objectivity. People have said to me, "What's this little Japanese girl doing in the snow?" But in fact, it's only petals. I saw this little Japanese girl. I tried to speak to her as best I could, and I took a few photos. And there's this one photo where she's standing there as if she's waiting for something to fall out of the sky, as if she's waiting for the Messiah. In the end, it's a shower of snow, a shower of gold, a shower of light that rains down on her. I've done dozens of reports in Brittany. I love Brittany. So on the same contact sheet, you can see bigouden, a traditional headdress. You can see little processions and fishermen. And suddenly in the corner, no, we mustn't forget it, a sand dune where there are 2 lovers. I took it from some distance. I did what I could, but I didn't want to disturb them. How many times have we all photographed lovers in Paris? And here it was in Brittany. And the girl's dress was opened up like the corolla of a flower. Is it a flower? It must be a flower. So you have the dune and 2 lovers, and I'll leave you to look at it. I wasn't expecting this one either. So it's another example of a lucky find rather than invention. For the first time in around 1956, I remember the date more or less, I wanted to go see Portugal. But bear in mind that at the time, we didn't have many photos or anything of countries like that, which were still quite isolated in 56. So I came to Nazaré. My wife and I had gone there by car. The journey back then was endless. It took 2 or 3 days. We parked the car, she had a rest, and I got out. People had told me about Nazaré, so it was kind of an adventure. I love the term adventure in the best sense of the word. And I saw on the beach this man with his child in his arms, looking at the ocean, and he really was waiting for me to come along. It makes me laugh. When I say a photo was waiting for me, I mean that chance was waiting for me, the photographer's chance, the chance I had created after several days on the road. And what amuses me is that for once, almost all the photos on this contact sheet are interesting. Sometimes with contact sheets, there's just one. Sometimes you never print up any of them. But on this contact sheet, it looks like I'd been touched by the hand of God. There's someone sitting in front of this huge panorama, and this whole sheet is very rich. But it's not always the case. I've been to India perhaps 10 times, and unfortunately I've never seen the Taj Mahal. I'm told it's very beautiful. Once there was no train to get there, another time there was no airplane, but never mind. The tourists go there. I go to foreign countries to see someone, to see people like us, see a family, see how people eat, how they live, how they go to work in the fields. And here, every day, there was this meal. The man is sitting down and he's served by his children or daughters-in-law. So there's the grandfather, like a patriarch. He has his grandson on his lap. His food is served and he's eating. I was in India to photograph a man. It was a hard place to get to. It was a long way. There was no train. So we traveled in a kind of jeep. And the Hindu guide would say to us, "Yes, we're nearly there." And we'd go another hour and he'd say, "We'll make it." And at one point there wasn't even a bridge and we had to ford the river. "We'll make it." And then there was no hotel. We had nowhere to sleep. It's a very different approach to being a tourist. I've nothing against tourists. I like the idea, but I don't think I've traveled like a tourist. So we arrived. It was nightfall. Where can we sleep? We said. Everything's easy in India, he said in broken English. Very easy? You can sleep there. So we slept right there on a bed. We ate the little there was. When you sleep on the floor, you get up very early in the morning. I sprang up out of bed, and what did I see? This view was waiting for me. I hadn't planned this one either. It's amazing, but it was waiting for me. I'll always remember. Near a fire was the cow, people warming themselves up because it was cold. You can see their houses very clearly in the background, which is shrouded in a kind of mist. This photo, which wasn't included in the report at the time, is the one which has stood the test of time. I consider photographs as a gift in the sense of a present. It's a present. It's present, but it's also a gift. And to come up with this photo of New York, although I like the countryside, I've spent most of my life in big cities. I'm always in Paris and New York, and I feel at home there. On the same contact sheet, you can see a kind of gathering for what hadn't yet been called ecology. It's funny. I followed them, and then some other things. I had to go to Brooklyn Bridge, where I saw this girl who was looking at the water, looking into infinity. That's a good word to end on, infinity. I think that the photographer always has one eye on infinity. He says to himself, hopefully, maybe today I'll take another photo. The weather's fine, maybe I'll cross the Seine this afternoon, go through the Luxembourg Gardens that I've been going through for years, and perhaps there'll be a photo waiting for me. Perhaps a photo's waiting for me. So I'll be off now. I'll take a camera in my bag, though.
If there's one thing photographers must never, ever do, it is to show their contact sheets or to display them in public. One must never show one's contact sheets because they may prove too revealing, because wrong conclusions could be made, and perhaps, and even worse, correct ones. Let us now move on to examine several types of my contact sheets. This first contact sheet represents a short moment in time during a vacation in Spain in 1951. As usual, I carried my Leica and snapped at anything that piqued my interest with no particular thought in mind. Upon closely examining this contact sheet many years later, I found one picture which I think is quite good and another one about which I'm not too sure of as yet. The rest are snapshots of my friend and of his wife and of his child and of other friends. The lady with the cropped face and hacked chicken is a picture that I'm only half sure of. While driving my automobile, I snapped some shots of streetcars from my driver's seat. The boy on the back of the streetcar, taken from my car, is the one that I liked, but which needed a lot of manipulation in the printing to make it legible. In this contact sheet, the situation was very emotional and touching. People in a highly charged state, and to complicate matters, photography was strictly forbidden. The scene is the railway station in Budapest, The year 1964. The people on the train were emigrating, perhaps leaving their country forever. Invading their privacy at such a tender moment while trying to be inconspicuous so as not to be caught by the police was my biggest anxiety. The shoot was necessarily brief. Some Hungarian trains run on time. By observing the clock in the center top of the pictures, the shooting of the entire contact sheet took 10 minutes, culminating in the few seconds of the train's actual departure. I think that even a trained orangutan with a wide-angle lens could not fail to make an acceptable picture of that situation. Still, there are rules in photography, as in all the plastic arts, and any useful picture must be a good picture first. There are many good emotional moments caught on the whole contact sheet, but there is only one in all of them which is a properly framed picture combining the emotion and a proper composition. A lucky thing, too, because the woman in the picture finally noticed me immediately after the good frame was shot. These two contact sheets are the result of a promenade on the beach in Trouville in 1965. I observed a man trying to close his beach umbrella, so I followed and snapped away, miraculously unnoticed during the shooting of over 70 exposures with a change of film in between. The more the man struggled, the more amusing the situation seemed to me. I was praying that he would not succeed and that I would not run out of film, and in fact, without the last picture at the end of my roll of film, when he gives up and returns home with a still opened umbrella, there would be no point or resolution to the photographs. If there's a lesson in this, it is that persistence and just one more could be a photographer's best friend. The time is 1959. The scene is an American industrial fair in Moscow. The characters are the Vice President of the United States, who plans to run for president, and the Chief of the Soviet Union, Nikita Khrushchev. The situation is massive crowds and bedlam as the two politicians move from exhibit to exhibit, Nixon boasting about American accomplishments, Khrushchev fielding the jibes, and then joining into the asinine argument. By sheer luck, I guessed correctly where they would turn up next, which was at a display of a modern kitchen behind a barrier. I rushed to it to have an unobstructed view as they approached the rail. Luck was with me. With a direct view and no one to push and shove, I circumnavigated Nixon and Khrushchev, finding my best range. From then on, it was like shooting fish in a barrel. But how pictures can lie. The illusion is one of Nixon standing up to the Soviets, while the reality was an argument about cabbage soup versus red meat. Bakersfield, California, 1984. It would be hard to imagine a funnier group of people than a gaggle of middle-class, middle-America nudists unless it were that same group of nudists in social situations mixed with an assortment of fully dressed people. But the nudist ethic is not just a bed of roses, and without some practical problems. Even dedicated nudists must, at times, compromise and wear shoes, hats, and an occasional T-shirt because of inclement weather, or hot sun, or any number of atmospheric conditions not completely suitable for nudistic comfort. Sometimes they may even wish to wear a small, non-concealing article of clothing just to add a dash of elegance. When nudists get together to be judged by their dressed peers for their beauty and various other attributes, then you have a priceless situation. It is these visual contradictions, of course, that are a photographer's dream. Coming to such a fertile situation, the photographer needs only to find a good frame and a good moment. This contact is from a commercial fashion assignment. One might ask, why take so many pictures of the same situation? The answer cannot be altogether satisfactory, but here goes anyway. Modern motorized cameras are built for the maximum and the fastest use of film. In the old days, before advanced mechanization, photographers took less pictures with the same or even better results. Another reason can be that there are minuscule differences among the 36 pictures on the contact sheet, and one of those differences would separate a good picture from a bad one. Personally, I don't think so. Another reason is that the photographer is being paid a lot of money for his efforts, so he might as well take many extra pictures to show that he is really working hard, while supplying his art director, who also needs to occupy his time with something to do, in making his selections. In the case of these contacts, luck stepped in and made me a little gift. Suddenly, from nowhere, while my camera motor was chugging away, a man appeared wheeling a baby carriage, making for an amusing, incongruous photograph. The man and baby carriage was in the right place for only a split second, and 2 frames later he was gone forever. The published picture came from the masses of near-identical photos. The one that I kept for myself was the one that luck and providence gave me. And then this Christmas, at least once a year, and the need to send greeting cards and salutations to friends and relatives. What better subject than candid pictures of one's own adorable children being adorable? Fleeting expressions, unexpected moments, what better reason for carefully reading contact sheets? But for the good of our industry and to protect the mystique and the mistakes of photographers, contact sheets must be as private as conversations with a psychiatrist or sessions with one's own father confessor.
A contact sheet is a series of pictures with no logical sequence. The eye deals in sensations, not in logic. A contact sheet isn't a film telling a story, but a journey. Perhaps you hope to discover secrets as you search through my contact prints, but you'll find only a groping, a series of failures, false notes discarded in the search for the right one. I'm often asked, did you get what you wanted? How should I know what I wanted? A photo is an encounter, a surprise. I often take photographs as I stroll about, but also when I'm after a story. It's the 1st of July, 1962, and I'm walking the streets of Algiers just before independence. Suddenly, at the corner of a street, my stroll turns into a mad race, the disorder and cacophony of a big demonstration. How can you frame a photo in such a chaotic outburst of faces, banners, outstretched arms? I move to the head of the procession to get in front, to face the faces, the stares. Kappa was right. If the photos are not good, it's because you aren't close enough. So I walk backwards. The faces, the shouts come closer. The click of the shutter. I feel I'm photographing better. Eyes full of dust and sun, images jostle each other in a wild melee as I vibrate in sympathy with the crowd. I've had other moments of exhilaration in other crowds. Here in Beijing, Tiananmen Square in 1965. 1 million men and women are marching in close formation with just one order, one sound. Demonstrators and police are together on the side of authority. This can be read on the faces, on the banners. The sound swells, the excitement too. But I'm not recording sound here. Let's not confuse senses. I'm looking for a picture, a photo to say why these people are shouting, against whom. As the shouts reach their height, portraits of Mao and Ho Chi Minh, pictures within a picture, appear side by side in my viewfinder. This is the right photo, the one I've been waiting for. Drawn into the wake of a cause, at the time simple and self-evident, I find myself in Washington one day in October 1967. The Indian summer sun is shining down on a huge and joyous march for peace in Vietnam. By their hundreds and thousands, blacks and whites, girls and boys, dare to lay siege to the Pentagon, fortress and symbol of the most powerful army in the world. That day, American youth puts a beautiful face on America. I shoot away in a frenzy. Night falls. I'm finishing my films when this young girl with a flower, facing the bayonets alone, draws the symbol of American youth in my viewfinder. It's the last frame of my last film. It has had good luck. It's been all round the world, while the others have stayed in the bottom of a drawer. Now, I'm rereading this contact sheet like a notebook. Let me choose another photo. Masked faces and outstretched bayonets form a sinister pattern in pictures. This is a grim face shown by the American government that day. But the flower isn't there, only the bad men. The first choice really was the right one. In 1953, I leave Lyon for Paris. These are my first steps in the capital and in photography. With my Leica and only one film, I'm strolling near the Eiffel Tower, which is being repainted. I suddenly noticed these paintbrush-bearing acrobats, and wishing to see them more closely, I climb up. Hanging onto the little spiral staircase with only my 50mm lens, I can't take close-ups or wide-angle shots, so I have only one choice left, that of the right moment. These constraints, these limited means, were my good luck, in fact. And the choice was easy with this contact sheet, which isn't always the case. The best photo strikes the eye, as the right chord strikes the ear. I've seen the world, but I'm not a globe-trotter. I don't even think that travel suits me. I'm more of a stroller. I travel at my own speed. In 1955, it took me 6 months by road to get to India, where I lived for a year. This is Benares on the banks of the Ganges. Another crowd, but not shouting this time. In the vast murmur of silence and prayer, there is harmony and contemplation. The pilgrim, spreading a sari out in the sun, is creating an ephemeral sculpture in the light. Here in India, everything is black and white, but the white is dominant. Khomeini has returned to Tehran. From a roof, I watch the chador-clad women's hysteria as they throw all they wear beneath their veil at the imam. Black veil or white sari, draperies are always beautiful, always photogenic. I like the walls with their graffiti and slogans, beautiful above all when we don't understand them. I never got close to Khomeini, but I met his face, his stare, painted on a large billboard in a street in the Tehran suburbs. More walls and draperies, 2 eyes, 2 veiled women. Like India, Iran is a black and white country, but here black is dominant. On May the 12th, 1987, at 1 p.m. sharp, millions of television viewers are waiting for Klaus Barbie to appear. In the Lyon Palais de Justice, the lawyers wait too. Suddenly, Barbie appears in my viewfinder. I know he's a torturer and a killer. My camera has never been a more effective shield. I press tensely on the shutter release. 44 years before, here in Lyon, so many resistance comrades, close relatives, were tortured and shot by the butcher of Lyon. Now he is only a few feet away. He looks a gentleman, courteous, reserved, almost vulnerable. You trust him with your children. But can the picture be trusted? That evening in the laboratory, on the contact sheet, I discover something I hadn't seen. The respectful looks centering on the accused as if he were a star. During the trial, I met another person, Julien Favet, the only surviving witness of the easier roundup ordered by Barbie. 43 children, 5 to 15 years old, thrown alive into the flames at Auschwitz. Favet is a former farmhand, illiterate. With his deformed eye and twisted mouth, he could really be frightening. And yet, he's a gentle and sensitive man, obsessed by the truth, revolted by injustice. you really must beware of appearances. Covering current events can be exhilarating and supply fine raw material. But for me, photography is usually a solitary activity with long hours of walking and waiting. I photograph people and events of every kind, but streets, villages and country are my favorite places. Sunday in a Touraine village, the celebration of the 150th anniversary of the Pont-le-Voix Fire Brigade. Captain Bonal is conducting the music with a master's hand. No need for a caption. Clearly, this is France. These two sisters, one a modiste, the other a dressmaker, Renée and Cécile Aloïs, have been dressing identically for 80 years. I take 4 or 5 shots of the same scene. Then, with a step forward, the eye moves a few inches and everything is changed for me. The right photo is here. These small details have made the difference. I choose from the contact sheet, and once I have chosen the photo, I forget it a little, and it lives its own life.
I always thought that photography should be fun, and if it was not, it should at least earn me some money. And if it did neither of the two, it should then at least substitute for psychotherapy. Contact sheets are mostly a waste of money, I find. The smart boys know this, and they shoot in color, most of the time anyway. 99.9% of the frames on a contact sheet are the mistakes one makes while photographing. Because it is a waste of money, I love them. There are things in life we must do just because we find them unprofitable. Also, contact sheets are private. They belong to me, whereas photographs, once they are out of my hands, take on a life of their own. My most recent contacts are made in the revolution in Romania. They are full of contradictions, I find. I think of myself as a man of peace, and yet I seem to love violence. In Bucharest, people were being killed around me. One got a bullet in the head and was dead. Yet what went through my head at the time? If I am exposed too long, I would be dead next to him. Then I was also thinking of the famous Bob Capa picture on the Spanish Civil War showing a dying soldier throwing up his gun. That great dramatic moment. So I waited, and I waited, and I waited to get that picture. From behind me, some Romanian screamed at me to get back. He said, "This is not El Salvador." I guess he had seen a lot of TV footage on El Salvador. What I like about this contact sheet is how it shows times do change. In the 1967 war between the Arabs and the Israelis, a euphoria seemed to follow the first days of victory. Then the Israelis thought their conflicts had now come to an end and peace was here at last. That's what they thought. Well, we now know better. Here am I on the battlefield, and here are some Palestinians on a battlefield picking it over. And here in Jerusalem we see an Israeli army patrol returning with their loot. And in this picture is a religious Jew holding his hat so it won't blow away. Holding his hat is about the only thing that hasn't changed over the years. One more war picture. I was visiting German relatives, farming peasants who had lived on their land for generations. They told me of the witches in their village and pointed out one that lived near their house. Then they said it was forbidden to mention such things in public. Afterwards, I went to the cemetery that contained their dead, good soldiers who had died for their fatherland. I did a book on black people in America, and it had to do with people like Martin Luther King returning home after receiving the Nobel Peace Prize. A generation after I had made the picture, someone in the New York Magnum office framed it and hung it on the wall. Then maybe a year after that, a black fellow in the office told me he had done it, and only recently found out that I had made the picture. I was now something special to him, and he asked if I had really stood so close to King. It then dawned on me that, yes, I had really stood close to King, and I had the photograph to prove it. Louisiana, USA. Printed over the electric door, colored tier. The guard said, "What do you want wasting time looking at colored?" Hands reached out to me from the cells. "Help me," a voice said. You, I need a lawyer. I've been here 3 months waiting for a trial." Calling to me as I passed along the cell blocks. "No one knows where I am. Tell my family where I am. I'm innocent." Out of the shadows, a voice said to me, "I cannot live here. It will be a bloodbath." Yeah, a bloodbath. The guards watched me suspiciously from their chairs in the office. "Desegregate this place, it will be blood. Mixing white men with animals. Can't make us do that." The guard said, "When it gets too crowded in the colored tiers, we try weeding out the hardened homosexuals and separating them from the newcomers." I wanted to know the black city in my city. I knew black artists, dancers, actors, who were living where I lived, and now I visited the neighborhoods they were escaping from. Who owns the city? Who owns this photograph I made? People like it, editors like it. It has been used as a poster to advertise the little joys of life. And sometimes I wonder if my camera is not pretending to be God. South Carolina. What'd you be doing here with that camera, mister? Don't be fooling around here. We ain't in no good mood. You're looking at unemployed, hungry men. Some been sitting here for weeks waiting for work. It's getting close to shutting time. Won't be no work for us here today, mister. Don't be fooling around here. We ain't in no good mood. I did a book on religion and picked the chosen people since I considered myself one of them, though I never understood why I had been picked. For months I lived in Jerusalem with people who looked like my grandparents. What these people thought of me, I never knew, but they couldn't throw me out, as I was a member of the tribe. I went into their inner sanctums. I danced and sang and prayed hour after hour, until one day I said, enough, and whipped out my camera and clicked off 11 frames. Someone caught me, winked, and said, enough. The question is, just what is a photograph? The Jewish God commands us not to make or worship graven images. Well, says a good Talmud student, is a photograph a graven image? Not if you look at it from the backside or from the sides. What do you see? Nothing. Only from the front is there something to see that perhaps could be interpreted as God commanded. But, and buts are big in the Jewish religion, only a fool would think a piece of paper is a cow or the real thing. And who wants to be a fool? That's how my argument went. And most people I photographed agreed with me. A photograph is not the real thing. Homicide in the garage of a lavish apartment building. This had all the markings of a mafia killing. It was explained to me that the mafia hired skilled lawyers to advise on such things. The man had been shot 3 times in the back of the head. In order to convict, the state would have to find the 3 guns, the 3 men who did the killing, and then prove which of the 3 bullets actually killed the man, and who fired which gun. The establishment magazine, the London Sunday Times, asked me to do a story on violence. I photographed what I thought violence meant to me. If I could not open a window because of pollution, that was violence to the person, I thought. And graffiti was violence to the eyes, and a lack of trees in the city was violence to the mind. Anyway, that was the story I sent to London. Afterwards, they sent me a telegram saying, great, loved the story, but needed more blood and gore. I then went out and photographed over 50 homicides. They just loved it. Over the years, I learned the ins and outs of working with the police. I can only conclude there is a kind of madness when a sane, grown-up man walks around with a gun. Yet I'm not against it. One dull night, an officer brought in a puppet. It was real fun. The puppet asked questions of fellow police officers, even of the puppeteer himself. In the end, those who did not give satisfactory answers were shot by the puppet.
Why don't I use contact sheets? Because on a small format, which I don't use, that's maybe 2 inches or something, not much more, what can you hope to see? On a contact sheet, I can see nothing. Because I have to see the facial expressions. The effect of a mass of people alone is not enough for me. For this series, I used the flash. Almost out of cruelty, a deliberate choice. Seeing them in diffused light didn't bring over the idea of melancholy and sadness. The flash was a touch of cruelty that I added to other cruelties. A truthful cruelty, I'd say, intentional, because it captured the scene I saw in the hospice. I saw it, with a harsh flash which burned, the part that was not old age but rendered it more tragic and sadder. It added black to the darkness and even more shadow to the shadow. I recall the hospice, the first few times I went. For a long time after, I couldn't eat anything. I rejected everything I ate. This one has lost her teeth. The other one's dentures are broken. One of them can't see, the other can't hear. There's all sorts there. There was one sucking away at a piece of meat. She couldn't chew it, so she took it out of her mouth and put it on the table. The one next to her, who couldn't see, was feeling for her food. She took the meat and put it in her mouth. Just watching it was enough to make you sick for months. Then there's cruelty. They're almost paralyzed and can hardly move, but if another old lady stops nearby, they can nudge her and try to make her fall over. They're not all like that, of course, but they can be, for sure. There was one who looked to be dying. She couldn't speak. There was another beside her reciting the rosary. I was taking pictures and someone said, "Can you do that tomorrow morning?" But I was convinced I had to get the shot right away. I could sense that the poor woman wouldn't last the night. When I came back the next morning, the bed was empty. Just another thing engraved in your memory. You remember so much. The photos I took show nothing compared to what I saw in there. They are just an excuse to leave a marker for myself to remind me that I was there. And when I think that I was there, I think of everything I saw. The stench when you go in, it's like the stench of death. I don't know what causes it. I call it the stench of death. So, you don't know what there is here. This whiteness that in other photos expresses life, the will to live, in the hospice meant to me, remove, take away. Almost like someone taking life away from you one day. It burns. The sheet doesn't interest me as such. The material, it was a white, which, if it spread further, covered all the paper. The human being had already disappeared. In this shot of the little old lady and the man, you can see, and this is what I find touching, that they were lovers in real life. They weren't husbands and wife. That, too, means something. They became lovers once more in the hospice. I think she was over 90 already, and he was more or less the same age. Every morning they'd meet up. The old man got some sweets ready. She came to say hello, and he'd give her a sweet, and with her soft little hand, almost as soft as a child's. There was something so gentle about them, something impossible. That's it. They'd talk to me about white streets, silhouettes dressed all in black. So I wanted to shake off this melancholy to find something more spectacular, more imaginary, more dream than reality. And I went to Scano. And I saw some cattle come out of a side street. I didn't know. I had no idea. Black cattle and people dressed in black. At the hospice, the problem was the fear of time ticking away. Here, on the other hand, beauty was born out of time. A kind of suspended time that had never ticked by, that would have changed nothing. The people were the same as centuries before. The whole village formed a single family. You'd see them together. It was something totally different, unlike anything I'd ever seen before. Quite honestly, my feet barely touched the ground. It was as if I was flying in a dream and photographing the scene at the same time. For me, the light was quite magical. All the joy I've had has been with this camera. I could never part with this object, which has never been an object. It really is a nothing kind of camera. It cost 16,000 lira. There's just the lens that a seminarian dropped. As a result, there's not much to say about my camera. It's better not to look at it. It makes people who see it quite depressed. In these shots, also, you find the burned whites, just like in Scano. Now, why the burned whites? Because it wasn't earthly reality, anything we know. I don't know the ground, the fields, or the walls, which interested me. It was their movement. What importance has the ground, with young priests playing and running? The important thing is to be receptive to these people who grow up but remain children forever. To have stripped these priests of the usual values, of the things I was used to seeing. To see them dressed and moving in a certain way with prayer their only concern, and their way of raising their face to heaven, hoping that everything would come to pass. No one knows that I went to Lourdes. I went twice. The first time I was commissioned, but I gave the money back because I wasn't capable of taking the pictures. The first time, there was one, a high-angle shot which isn't here. I don't even know where the negative is. Anyhow, it was a shot taken from high up with a child, his body twisted, screaming like a madman. I was sorry to have missed that, but anyway, it wasn't to be. The second time, though, I took some photos. Not many, to be honest, but a few more because I felt invested too. In other words, I wanted to capture. I'd taken my son with me. So I was moved like the others, and I wanted to grab images that didn't necessarily interest others. Like the memory of the place where I took my son. I didn't calculate it. I calculated nothing because I was in the grip of the pain. I took pictures, that's all. Not a single one of all these people, these millions of people, is thinking of making love to a woman. No one is thinking of undressing a woman. No happy people here. Seeing the farmers gave me an idea. You just have to take a look at their hands, the creases and wrinkles. They made me think of the furrows in the soil. Except that the earth is not horizontal, but vertical. So the image always went towards the heavens. It's more spiritual for me. This idea of sending the picture into the heavens. When the farmer came to a tree, the beast in front, pulling the plow, would describe a curve around the tree. So he adds other signs, and the earth became something magical. I thought I should get even closer to the earth, and by coming close in a plane, you get the right measure to photograph the landscape. And the distance is born when you still see the earth as matter, like man's skin, the earth. And conversely, you see the furrows, these signs, as something familiar, as yours. I remember the times I went to see the farmer. He'd roll the pasta into a circle, slice it, and spread it out the tagliatelle. Anyway, all these signs from the sky, I saw them again. Then there were the ashes where they put potatoes. There were hot ashes, and they put the potatoes underneath, and this earth that they enlarged with signs. I set out to portray the farmer on the land. There are some where you can see, for instance, a dead man's face. But you only see the faces because you start from the farmer's stables, kitchen, staircases, the same staircases you walk up yourself. And then the onions hanging on the wall, or the garlic, and I don't know what, creating signs. To my mind, these are signs that I found and learned to read inside and around the farmer's house. I saw a camera in a shop for 800 liras. It was a Comet, the cheapest there is. I bought it on an impulse, even though it was like a toy for me. And on Christmas Day, I went down to the sea without thinking about what I was going to photograph. I went right down to the water, with the waves crashing in, one leg frozen and soaked. As I watched the waves move, it occurred to me that if I moved the camera, I would stop the wave and make the sand move, which for me was quite magical, given that I understand nothing about that kind of thing.
When I get the contact print, my first view, the first sight of what I've done, it's always exciting. Because even now, after I don't know how many years as a photographer, from 1936 to 1990, it's quite a lot really, I'm always awed by the fact there's something on the film. I don't take myself seriously. I take my work seriously, but not myself. When I work, I really work. This is a nude girl I knew that I photographed in her house in Hollywood. And it's a bit sadomaso because her feet and legs are roped, tied. I'm having her climb the stairs like a dog. When it was exhibited, a lot of people complained. They said, that's women's lib howl. But she liked doing it. She was delighted. And well, at number 20 I stopped. I don't know why. And suddenly, a few days later, this is a dinner with my wife, Alice Springs, and her girlfriend. Now here we have these sadomaso photos, and here we have pretty little snaps of my wife and her girlfriend. And I find that very, very funny. Sometimes when I have a lot of little snaps, the film stays in the camera for a long time, and it's such a surprise. All photographers are voyeurs, well, more or less. Myself, more. I start by opening all the drawers in the desk, and I see photos of pretty girls, family shots, etc., and I say to myself, ah, that's fun. Then I take photos of the drawer's contents. The film ends, 36, and I start working on my fashion session. And later it becomes the trigger for a whole series. It's like a sketch, like a rough drawing. In 1983 I did Hockney, Bowie, Isherwood, Rampling and Dicky de Saint-Phal. That was 2 years later. I did a coverage for Treble in Prague in '88. I'm out on the streets at night, in one of the streets in the old town. I have my guide and a young man to drive the car, and I say, right, stand over there, 10 meters from the camera, just to give a little atmosphere. Suddenly, the boy starts undressing the girl, and I say, are you mad, both of you? The girl is all for being undressed, for being naked. They carry on, they don't care. A woman goes by, smiling a little, and I say to her, does that shock you? And she says, not at all, not at all. And nobody. It's impossible in another city. Even the people sleeping in the houses around, well, we made quite a lot of noise, really. We were talking and everything, and it was late. It was 10 or 11 at night, but no one complained. Well, try and do that in a French village or a small American town. You get locked up straight away. I didn't ask her to undress. It happens to me from time to time. A woman undresses in front of my camera without asking me. Suddenly I'm face to face with this person who has no more clothes on. Or perhaps they like to be that way in front of my camera. I don't know if it happens to other photographers. Here, for example, Ariel didn't pose after her haircut, and I didn't say much. I took this. I did it quickly, snap, snap. And it's often the first one that's right, because I say, ah, yes, that's pretty. Click. And after I say, well, now look left, now look right. And it gets... Looking at these 8 photos, you can see that she was much better in the first, and that's often the case. Because when I start giving instructions, it's not true anymore. A lot of people like this photo. There are men who've said to me, that's the most erotic photo I've ever seen. I've had a machine made, hooked up to a camera with a motor, and equipped with a timer that can be set by the model, who decides whether to work quickly or slowly. There's a mirror close to the camera to check the pose. A flash is connected to the magic box, and before each shot there's a sound signal and a light flashes. The system is designed entirely to keep the model alert and excited. This photo is called Self-Portrait with a Woman and a Model, and it sums up my life in France. I'm with the model, and June has come to have lunch with me. I say, "Sit down, I've almost finished. We're going to eat after." The great difference is that there's someone who doesn't realize she is in the picture, in the field of view. And every time she looks at the subject, she looks at the scene, in a way, because she's observing. She looks, and it's very funny. Her expressions are funny. You can almost see what she's thinking. Often I go through a lot of archives, and each time there's a different approach in my head, another point of view. In 1981, for the first French edition of Big Nudes, we chose number 4300, picture 7. In 1984, I put together a portfolio in a limited edition called Private Property. For that, we chose the night picture in seaweed, 4304, negative number 7. In 1990, I received a proposal for an exhibition in Naples, and I chose 2 nudes in seaweed that I'd never printed, number 4299, picture 11. I wanted to make a diptych. 11 is night, done with a flash, and a number I don't have at hand, which is the same photo in twilight. None of the 12 6x6 pictures on the sheets are the same. The girl is the same in 2 of them, but the sea has changed. That's the sequencing I like, that I look for, but it really happens on a contact sheet. I decided to print the contact sheet in 82 by 99 to make a giant contact sheet. Personally, I always say you have to sacrifice your own children. An ugly photo shouldn't be protected. I'm the first to listen to people when they say, "Well, that's no good. It's really ugly." And I kill. I'm very willing to kill. I think a lot of young people protect their children far too much.
really my photography began with violence. My normally mother's milk from the breast is mother's milk, yes? Well, I had Hitler's bombs. So what I'm saying is I had a diet of war. And so as young boys, we made war our playtime. At the age of 11, we were engaged in warfare, and we knew how to die. So I knew about warfare before I came to warfare. If you go to war, you have to go for a purpose, not just because you're enjoying the adventure, or sometimes if you miss death, if you miss it by a split second because the next man dies next to you, it can sometimes give you a kind of rise. It can sometimes give you a excitement. And I had to arrest this excitement and say, hang on, what are you doing? Are you making a Hollywood film here? Or are you trying to say war is bad? And I had to arrest myself and say to myself, this is not what you really want. This is not the path you want to tread. You're saying you want to care about humanity, and yet suddenly you're in this battle. It's meaningless. The extraordinary thing about Biafra was that the English government were supporting the legal Nigerian government. And so I found myself on the side of the oppressed, the Biafrans. For instance, this photo is just one of those moments in the heat of battle when they were dragging the wounded to an old worn-out truck. And they couldn't move the truck until it was completely full of wounded men, because they said they couldn't use the petrol. It was a savage war, Biafra, because they had no medical supplies, and they had they had a lot of doctors, but no medical supplies, and no food, and no ammunition. It was madness. This goes back to the earlier part of my life as a photographer. This was 20 years ago, more now. So, of course, I have changed my philosophy. I used to concentrate on the battle, on the soldiers in the front, but of course, that was never the true story. The true story for me later developed into the suffering of civilians. This woman in this photo is 24 years of age. She has a naked, empty breast for the child. And I suddenly appear with my Nikon and my cameras and my full belly and start making photos. And in many respects, it's almost a crime. I'm clearing away some of the hypocrisy, and I'm showing the hypocrisy, The scales are unevenly balanced. You try to balance, but they are never true. They never come together in this situation. It doesn't matter how hard you try to be a human being, you will always get it wrong. I had a few days left before I had to make this rush back to England to my family. Somebody said, you must go to the hospital. And I was alone here, no other photographers. And there was a mother dying. She was dying of cholera. And her daughter was sitting beside the dying mother in utter despair. And the father came in with the baby, the young baby that was hungry and was actually biting its own fingers for food. I braced myself. I got myself ready for this. I psyched myself out for this. And I knew it was going to be a painful, painful experience. And normally people think photography is very easy. You just do it the way you clean your teeth or comb your hair. It's not. It's like climbing Mount Everest without oxygen. And then eventually the mother died. And so two men came and they transported the stretcher with the dead body into one corner of the field, and I quietly followed. And I put myself at a discrete distance, even though it seems very close. I'm at a discrete distance. All the time I was searching for the approval of the husband, of the dead wife. I was looking for his approval that I could be there to record this tragedy. And I found myself hiding, using my camera as a way of hiding my grief, my involvement. It's not easy for me to live with these photos. They are like a branding iron that you put on cattle. You know, they're in my mind, but they're right inside, and there's a very big scar in there, you know. The reason I don't put too much faith into contact sheets, you see, contact sheets are very great. They're a big advantage for editors. But I've always had control over my work. I've always kept control. And I know that when I'm in a war on any photographic situation, I know the one photograph that burns into my memory as the one I've made up my mind is the one I know. A photographer feels it, you know. A soldier brings his friend from the front, but his comrade has trodden on one of the plastic mines. Now, for instance, they build up in the contact sheet. You stand and you make the photos, and then the expressions of the faces change. And I chose this one because I was very close to these people, and I almost didn't show you the main reason for the picture, because the man's foot is missing. And I was so close, and it was very difficult to get into this photo. And yet I'm not as close as normal, because there's all this area around here that's very empty. But I was just trying to be discreet and not get too close. So I've chosen this photo because it has just about the right balance. And in the enlargement, you can see in the man's face the agony. You know, the danger is the icon, the work of art, the Goya, you have to be careful of. I try to shoot photography in its condition, in its presence. I don't try to improve lighting, I don't try to change lighting. I try to capture what is there. Sometimes if you are too close, you get no detail of the surroundings. But in this case, I try to give you everything. In the case of this other photo here, of the astonished-looking government soldiers, they're astonished because one of their colleagues has been killed, and there's a little girl that's killed as well in the picture. She's dead. So what I've tried to do is to show you as much as I can, to give you a chance to learn about the environment, the clothing of the soldiers. And night was coming, it was dusk, it was still daylight, still opportunity to shoot pictures. You could feel in the atmosphere danger. And suddenly, without any warning, crunch, 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 and thousands of rounds of AK-47 bullets, ammunition was coming towards me, and I ran from the road. And I was bleeding in between my legs and down all my both legs. And I crawled across the road, and I pulled my trousers down to make sure my manhood was still there, if you can understand what I mean. I crawled down the road on my stomach, and there were some more paratroopers, and they took me, and they took me into a house, and they gave me a morphine, and then they put me on a truck, and they went back to the front. So I thought, take your mind away from the situation, make photos. So I got my cameras out, and I started photographing the other wounded soldiers being put on the truck. These are not extraordinary photographs, because, you know, I was on morphine, I was high like a drug addict. And this man here was kicking me because he was dying. He was the man who was next to me when the shell went off, but he took all the shell in the stomach. And this is his last plea for life, for help. I was aware of the fact that my injuries were not serious. They were painful, but I knew I wasn't going to die. So I was suffering great shock and great relief. But at the same time, seeing my own blood was a lesson for me, because how can you photograph other people's pain when you don't know the value of pain? I found a building just a few miles from where I was injured. For some reason it was strange, and I wandered in the building, and I discovered I was in the madhouse of Phnom Penh, mental hospital. And I went into these rooms and I saw these insane women in the cells doing Oriental dance in a very graceful way, very beautiful way. And then I started making the parallels about war and about madness and about culture and dignity. And all these things are like all woven into one another. They're all there, whether you like it or not. They are there. I think in this contact sheet is a perfect example of beauty, the way I meant it, the way I saw it. They look as if they're lying on a stage, theatre. But of course, theatre does exist in real life. I mean, on the streets of our capitals, there is a form of natural theatre that is manifested by everyday life. My whole life has been a theatre of war. I regret it. I now spend most of my time in the English countryside photographing landscapes. It's very difficult to surrender 20 years of warfare and try to engage in peace. The photographs looked like battlefields. There was a threatening anger in the photographs. But the area where I live is full of magic and history. It's the area where King Arthur and King Alfred, it was the beginning of English history in my imagination. But this area where I live is haunted by the ghost of kingmakers and war, English war. So therefore I'm living in the beginning of English history, which was violent. And so in a way I have the spirits of violence plus the negatives in my filing cabinets. I am kind of damaged, probably permanently, by the fact that even though I photograph English landscape and still live photos of flowers and things like that now, I may be fooling myself to thinking I can escape from this lifetime of persecution that I gave to myself.